What's up guys, Doug Polk here, and today we're going to talk about how to stake poker players. This is going to be a video for people that are considering staking someone or getting a stake, or you're in a stake. Basically, it's a general how-to as well as some ideas to kind of make the stake work, as well as things you should look out for. Let's kick it off with discussing what a stake actually is, because I hear players use these terms sort of interchangeably: buying action, stake, loan. I hear people talk about all these words kind of in the same way, but they're very different things. So let's go through them one by one. First off, a loan is basically what it sounds like. You give someone money and they're expected to pay you back that money. A stake is an investment of capital that a player plays with in order to try and make money. Now, old school players think that a stake is a loan, but I disagree, and I don't think that's the current way that players look at it today. Then you have buying action. Buying action is you buy for a specific event. Maybe someone's going to play the main event and you want 10% of them. So you pay them $1,000 because the buy-in's 10K plus or multiply by whatever their markup is. And now you have a piece of them. The difference between buying action and staking is that in the buying action scenario, it's a one-time event. There is no future responsibility of any action owed or money, or basically you have a piece in one game, you win or you lose, and then that's it. In a stake, there's an expectation that if you lose money, you're going to continue to play in order to make it back. I don't want to talk about buying action for too long, but I want to just say a couple of things about it. So for starters, when you buy action in someone, you want to be really careful who you're buying action in. And that applies to people you stake even more so. But when you look at buying pieces of people, if someone's selling for an event and it's particularly a low stakes event that you feel like they should probably have the money for, you should be a little bit worried about the situation. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a bad deal or they're trying to rip you off or they're broke or any of those things necessarily, but it is an indicator that there might be some issues. In those spots, you probably want to look up to see if you can see public records of their play. See if there are any graphs that indicate the player might not be a winning one, and there is reason for concern that they're losing money. There can be legitimate reasons someone sells for a smaller stakes event or a medium-sized event. They could have a lot of fans that follow them and they want to give them a chance to win some of that money. They could have gone through hard times financially recently for something totally unrelated to poker. Or maybe they're just very conservative with their bankroll, and the idea of getting markup to sell pieces sounds attractive to them. But going to be straight up with you guys, the packages of people I've seen selling action, in general, you're definitely losing money, so be extremely aware of that. I think a good example of that is Phil Hellmuth. A lot of people buy action in Phil, a lot of them probably because they like Phil or they want to watch Phil play, but he does sell at absurd markups and show up late. So if you were going to buy a piece of Phil Hellmuth, know that it's maybe fun, but not the best investment. Traditionally speaking, the best investment opportunities in buying pieces are people that are lesser known players. They don't stream, they haven't made any big final tables, but you know they have a good online poker background. Those are the guys, if you're trying to make money with buying pieces, I'd try to look out for, and not some of the guys that are more flashy. Damn it. But enough about buying pieces or loans. Let's talk about specifically stakes, because it's a complex issue. There are a lot of opinions about it, but I want to give you some good general staking rules. Now, this is a tweet that I sent out about a week ago on standard stake rules. Either a person can quit if there's no makeup. In makeup, only staker can end the stake. If the horse decides to quit poker, it's a backer loss, but the stakey can't continue to play poker. If they choose to play again, backer gets first right to resume stake, and quit and keep playing requires a buyout. I think that on average, most players would agree with this. Now, here's the thing that's really important for you to take away. You know, we're all adults, hopefully, but we're all adults here. And if you make an agreement with someone, then those terms are binding. If you decide that you get a stake from someone and you owe them all the money and you only get 10% of the profit, well, it's a terrible deal for you, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't count because it was a bad deal. You can't go back in time and say, oh, well, it turns out that was a bad deal, so I'm not going to go by that. Before we dive too deep into the specific nuances of some of these rules, I want to talk to you about the process of finding a stake as a backer, and then maybe a little bit as the person being staked, what to expect and how things should go about. So the first aspect to any stake occurring is finding your stake. Now, we talked a little bit about this already, but be wary of a lot of people looking for a stake. You know, this is the world of gambling, right? There are some shady people that will not pay you back or will do stuff. We've heard so many stories of this happening over and over and over again. So you should always be careful. And that's just a good piece of financial advice in general. Don't hand out your money easily. You know, pick your stakes wisely. it was an approach that I always had when I was staking people, to try and find guys that had good references. They were part of the community. I maybe knew them in person. They were good people. I always chose those guys over the people who might on paper be better poker players. And that might sound silly to you. Doug, why would you pick the guy who's not as good at poker? Well, two reasons. First off, I want people that I'm more able to trust. And then second off, especially when you're a good poker player, you can teach them. You can show them how to play poker and how to improve. So for me specifically, I always tried to lean towards the players that I could trust over the guys who might be good. Now, if you don't have a lot of poker experience or you're not good at poker, then it's going to be tough. You can't go as much down the rabbit hole of trying to find people and coach them because you can't coach. But that does also mean you have this extra layer of responsibility, and you might want to consider not getting involved in poker staking to begin with. Most people end up losing money with staking in poker. I would say a sizable majority. Now, I don't know everyone who's ever had a stake, but I've heard enough stories of people who either had stables or staked a few people. I've heard enough horror stories to know that a lot of people end up losing. Another problem I've always had with guys that were playing high stakes and stepping down and getting a stake, I always felt like they had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and so they didn't appreciate the opportunity you were giving them as much. Now, I'm not trying to say that you're saving them with the stake necessarily, but the thing is this: if I give someone money to play for me, it's not that I care about where you were before or where you're going to be after. It's how do you play on the stake with my money, and are you going to play well? Are you going to play your best game and forget about those past instances? And what I think is that a lot of higher stakes guys that step down, they're more willing to make plays they shouldn't make, or think that they're right, or argue with you, or do all these kinds of things. And I think you avoid a lot of headache by just going with the smaller stakes guys looking to kind of take a step up and do a bigger game. So going back to how to find players to stake. The first rule is be wary of high stakes players stepping down and getting a stake, because a lot of times they're going to be more difficult to manage, and these were not my more successful ventures. Second rule is try to get some references. Make sure that they have people that can vouch for them. I know it's not going to go a long way if you have a few people say that they know the guy or they worked with him in some capacity, but even if they know one or two guys that are somewhat notable in the poker community, that could tell you a lot about the person. Sometimes just by reaching out to or asking them for references and reaching out to those people, they might even warn you about some of the past behavior. You would be surprised how much information just by checking reasonable references that you can get. Now, of course, this is in situations where they have good references, but you should weigh that. If a stake has good references, it means a lot more than if they don't know anybody. The third rule would be I lean towards reaching out myself to stake people than giving people stakes that are reaching out to me. So I always had, this is actually the way that I got involved in staking to begin with. Over on the 2+2 poker forums, I was a full ring poker player. This has to be back in 2008 or so. And what I did was I realized that in the full ring forum, there were a lot of nits. Go figure. So what I did was I essentially offered these guys that play NL50 or 100 a chance to play 100, 200, 400 no limit on a stake rather than their own money. And they were already good players. They were already, guys that were doing well. But I reached out to them. I searched through all their posts. I saw the kinds of things they were talking about. I saw the threads that they were involved in, how they were active and they were part of the community. And I just reached out to a lot of people, giving them an opportunity. Hey, if you want to try and take a step up in stakes, if you don't want the risk of it, I'm going to back you for the endeavor. And that actually went pretty well. Overall, I found good poker players that, most of them said no, but some said yes. And that's how I started to build a stable. If people are coming to you looking for a stake, again, that can be a reasonable opportunity for you, but you have to be more careful. And you're trying to see this happen several times here in this video. You're seeing there are signs that you should be a little more careful. Losing graphs, they're reaching out to you. They played high stakes before, maybe a shaky reference. There are signs of don't do this. And I think that if you're ever in a situation where you have to decide, do I do this or not do it, and you're debating it, you already know the answer. Two more things you want to get straight before you jump into the stake. So another thing you want to do is, as the backer, is you want to get a sample of their results. I would always ask for hand histories. If they're an online player, I don't see any reason why they should hide that from you. Get them from the site, have them sent directly to you, so you can look at the hands, see what they did, see if they did anything really stupid, see if they had a drunken high stakes session. That stuff, if someone's willing to do that once, they're definitely willing to do it again. Now, I'm not saying that if they did it once, they will do it again, but in my experience, the kinds of people that have never done that in a hand sample are very unlikely to, and the people that have done it might make that same mistake again. And I know there are people who are like, that's not fair, dog. People make mistakes, so you should give them another chance. okay, look, I'm not here to judge people. You can live your life however you want to live your life, but it's my money, and I'm not putting my money in the line of fire because I believe in humanity. I don't really believe in humanity. And the last thing that you should do, this seems like a no-brainer, but I'll put it out there anyway. You should have some sort of written agreement of what you guys are going to be doing with the stake. Now, in my early days in staking, I had people sign documents. I talked with an attorney. They generally, how well they'll hold up in court is up for debate. Also depends on what jurisdiction you're in. There might be some ability to make it I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to paraphrase in a way that might make it sound misleading. But the point of the matter is that there are definitely going to be some issues in some places as to enforcing it. So it's kind of up to you if you want to do that or not. It is a good precedent to have the terms of the stake and them signing it, because then you actually do have an agreement. But at least, at bare minimum, have a written record, whether that's on a messenger or whether that's via an email. I did a lot of these through email. Have a written record. These are all of the points that we agreed to. If you want to do this, agree below. Here are some of the most important things that you get in that agreement. Number one, the split between the backer and the stake. I've heard of many different splits people have done, but my standard was always 50-50. People would sometimes argue, well, that I heard someone else at 60-40. That's great. You can go get backed by somebody else. I only do 50-50. And that's, I think, pretty fair. If you want to make some really specific exceptions for people, I don't think I ever did in my career staking, but if you want to make some exceptions, that's fine. But the thing is, as the backer, you're taking a lot of risk. If the makeup really piles up, then you might be down a lot of money, and you want to try and make sure that you're making those scenarios offset by winning a decent amount when the players do well. So I always say standard 50-50. I've heard of deals that get slightly better for the player as they do better, but I actually think that those don't make much sense. Here's why. If players are able to cut profit whenever they'd like, or they cut every so often, then when they're getting these better cuts, generally speaking, makeup is back to zero, right? Because they're cutting the stake, cutting the profits, stake continues, now they have a better cut. Well, now your risk to upside is much worse in that subsection of their play than it was beforehand. So I would recommend, as a backer, make your life easy and then always go for 50-50. If you're a player, you might as well take a swing at the 60-40, because why not? But typically those deals aren't too standard. After you get the split down, now you need to talk about the time frame. Is there going to be a set number of hands? Is it going to be a set amount of time? Typically speaking, or it could be a set amount of money. Typically speaking, I've never liked having those in the agreement. Now, I saw a post from Sheets where he talked about how he was a very prominent backer, and you sort of need to have a time period in order for it to be a legal contract. So maybe you have to have that in there for it to have any validity. But generally speaking, the reason I don't like that is because I feel like factors change a lot over the course of a stake. Maybe you're 3 months into a stake and the player's absolutely killing it, and they just want to cut the stake, right? In that spot, you're going to want to cut the stake. Otherwise, they're going to be playing on your money without wanting to be there. That's not a spot that you want. And typically, it's something that you agree is fine beforehand. So I find that having very specific constraints can be not the best situation. However, you should probably have some idea. Maybe at least 3 months, maybe at least 10K hands, at least something. You should have some sort of, vague at least, but if not vague, specific time frame for how long the stake is going to last. You got your split, you got your time frame. Now you need to talk about some of the other weird stuff that can go down. The first and most important thing is, what if the stake wants to quit poker? This happens constantly. Players decide that they just don't want to play anymore. Typically speaking, and this is probably a debatable point where different backers have different opinions, but my standard was always, if they want to quit poker, then they can do so and not owe money back. The reason is simple. If the stake does quit poker, or they want to quit poker, or they don't want to play another hand of poker, do you want them playing on your money? I think the answer to that is no. A lot of the guys who say, well, they should owe you the money, it brings up this question, which I think is a fair one. If you're going to owe the money back no matter what, aka a loan, why would you ever get staked? Oh, I'm going to get a loan, have to pay it back no matter what, and now I only get half the winnings? That seems ridiculous. Maybe there are people out there willing to take that deal, and if they did, so be it, but I don't think that really makes much sense to me as to why they would want to get staked. It could be fair that they have to pay part of it back, but overall, I would say in general, the standard is they can walk away free. But they have to really be quitting, not quitting to play full time but not in your stake. That is extremely not cool and unacceptable. The only time I ever had a situation where I had a stake that had to pay back some of the makeup after they quit a stake was in a spot where we took a really big shot. It went badly and they decided that they wanted to quit. Well, in that situation, you got a little bit of a different ball game, because if you can have stakes just take massive nosebleed shots, run a big tab, and then be able to quit on you scot-free, well, you do incentivize them to do that. Now, in this spot, the guy's a good guy. I don't think they do that on purpose, just the kind of the way that it went down. But the point remains, in situations like that, maybe you want to talk about that beforehand. Maybe you want to say, if we do this and you decide you don't want to play after, you're still going to owe some money. Otherwise, let's not do it. But be careful with these spots. I find one of the biggest problems people have with stakes is someone gets staked and then the backer has a lot more money than the stake in general. And now the stake wants to play in this big game that they've never been able to play before. And the backer wants them too, because the backer sees it's a good game, wants their stake in it, wants to make money. But the problem is, don't take shots that are so big you're not going to be able to grind it back lower. Because if you take a shot into a huge game, let's say you take a shot into 5,100 and lose 100K. Well, now you're back playing 510. It's going to take you ages to make that money back. Don't play games you have no reasonable chance to make the money back in unless you're really confident in the mid to high stakes games below it that you can make that money back. I would say this drives the majority of problems in staking. Taking a really big shot, the aftermath, the backer wanting them to grind lower, them not wanting to feel like them feeling they shouldn't have to, and then that causing turmoil. So just avoid the situation, get some wins under your belt, take some reasonable shots. And here's the solution. If you want to play in a really big game staked, what you should do is have part of that game on the stake, let's say half, and the other half is now sold action, and you can sell it to your backer. You should sell it to your backer. That's the way that things should go. In that scenario, now the backer wins even more if you win. They do have more exposure, and you're not completely buried if you lose. That's a little bit of a tip that I learned along the way in order to try and help make things work. It's also good to get in there what games are going to be covered on the stake. I think that's an important part too. What are you going to play? Have some specifics in there, because if it's just a free range, play whatever you want stake, and then things go badly, well, you kind of asked for it. Like, players will play whatever games they want to, and typically you want your stake to be specializing in a game that's good. And as the stake, you want that too. You're not getting staked just to play random shit so you can lose money. It's good to also get in there when you're going to cut profit. Typically, I've seen most people can cut profit whenever the stake is up money. I've also seen situations where profit is cut at a specific date every so often. I think that makes a little bit less sense to me, but overall, either one of those seems fine. In scenarios where the stake wants to quit the stake and continue to play poker and is in makeup, there is no way around this, guys. The stake has to pay the money back. Look, I get that a lot of people emphasize with the person on stake and a lot of makeup and he can't make money because of it, but until he makes that money back. But this is, when you sign up for a stake, you have to realize this is a possibility. This is particularly true with tournament staking. If you have a stake and they're playing tournaments, they're almost always going to be in makeup, because when they have a big score, they want to cut, and then otherwise they're losing. So it can't be a situation where you're like, you know what, fuck that guy, I'm going to go play on my own. Have a little respect for people. This is actually a topic I tweet about as well. You know, just because something makes you money doesn't mean that you should do it. And when a staker and a stake go into an agreement together, there should be a little bit of leniency on both sides to make it work. The staker should understand that the stake is working hard to try and win the money. The stake should understand that the staker went out on a limb financially to try and make this happen so that they could both succeed, and you should kind of work together. Generally speaking, if the stake and the staker end up having a disagreement on what they should do, it's the best policy to reach out for a neutral party arbitration. It's best if it's someone that's kind of friends with both of them, or if someone highly respectable that you can really count on their opinion. That's good too. You don't want to get someone that's only friends with one guy. Find a good neutral third party. It's even better if it's someone that knows the situation rather well. One last piece of advice: if your stake ends up in a lot of makeup, generally speaking, in those spots, I would try to offer people a restructuring where, until they get back to even, they can have 10% of the profits. The reason I did this was because I felt like it made it a more sustainable stake. It put them in a better situation, particularly if they're going through hard times financially. And it gave them a little more of a reason to put in that volume and want to succeed. And that's the main thing. On both sides of it, you want this to work. And I think that people get really caught up in their own view. Stakers want to make money. Stakes feel like their time isn't being valued, or the staker doesn't value them, or or they're kind of grinding hopelessly. You want to meet in the middle, and you want to try and work with people that can help you meet in the middle. One of the number one things I've learned in my life from business and staking is you want to work with reasonable people. If you're talking to someone and you're like, this guy is crazy, don't make deals with people like that. Don't work with people that are going to give you headaches. Find good people. There are enough good people out there in the world. You don't have to settle for otherwise. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but we've been going on for a while now. So I hope this video helped you guys understand how to find a stake, some of the warning signs, what you want to get down in writing, some of the process that goes along with it. I hope this was like a good guide for you guys to if you want to stake someone or you want to get a stake, the kinds of things to look for. But I do want to say just one more time before we go, most stakes will end in the red because typically good players find their own bankrolls. Not always, right? Which is why staking can make a lot of money. But typically players can find their own way of having a bankroll. Now, if you're a good player, you're going to coach them. It makes a dynamic that you might get some good players that want to sign up. If maybe you know some specifically good players that you have an opportunity to back, that's fine too. But be careful out there. Poker is gambling. No matter how much people want to say otherwise, it is gambling. It's still a strategy game with edge, but it's gambling. And there are a lot of people out there in the gambling world that you should be afraid of because they'll steal your money, and be careful.